Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Jenny, and I'm here today to start my March 2024 reading wrap-up. If you are new to my channel, I wrap up my books as I finish reading them, so I just make a clip after each book and then put them all together. And I do that because I feel like I have a more immediate reaction to the book than if I wait and film at the end of the month when I've already read them. The books that I tend to have read at the beginning of the month don't feel as immediate to me when I'm talking about them, so that's why I changed to this format. So my first finish of March was Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Route by Saidiya Hartman. And this was actually on my February TBR, and I was very close to finishing it at the end of February, but decided to carry it over into March. This is on my 5-star predictions list for 2024, which is all memoir. Memoir is a very sweet spot for me. I love reading memoir. And this book is an example of why I think it is such a great genre. So this book will take you through a history of Ghana from, mostly during the beginning of the slave trade and up until present day. So you get historical parts here that, of course, I didn't know much about Ghana at all, so this was really, really great to read. The second thing that you get from this is a personal exploration by Saidiya Hartman of her own feelings being African American and being descended from slaves and trying to find a sense of home. And what that displacement, how that displacement affects her search and the way she feels in the United States, but also the way she feels in Ghana. And what I loved about the way she wrote this book was she was very unflinching. There's not a lot of sentimentality in here. There is not a lot of, I think, what you could perceive this book to be like, a scholar going back to Africa to try to find roots that were severed because of slavery and displacement. You could see that as a very sentimental journey, but that's not Saidiya Hartman's angle here. She very much struggles with the reality of what it is to be African American and be in Ghana. She chronicles the history of other African Americans during different periods of the civil rights movement and beyond, moving back to Africa, this kind of Afro pride that was like a movement in the United States, and how it doesn't really deliver when you get to Africa, because Africans do not have a sentimentality or a particular discourse around the descendants of slaves who were removed from the continent. And so it's a really interesting examination of all of those feelings, all of those complex, layered realities that you face as a person who is forcibly removed from your ancestry, and you do not know who they are, you do not know where they're from, and the way that slavery and colonialism impacted Africa means that to actually find any remnants of anything that you could call your family or your history is practically impossible. And so Saidiya Hartman more examines different sections, different parts. The castle in Accra which was where the slaves were held before they were taken on the ships across the Atlantic. Obviously there was more than one port, but this was one of the ports in Ghana. She goes to the main town that was instrumental in the marketing of slaves. So it was a slave market, and slaves were brought from different regions in Ghana to this town, and this is the town where people were exchanging goods for people. And she visits near the end, which is a very quite moving part of the book, she visits a village of people who formed based on escaping. So they were trying to avoid being captured by slave traders. And so they moved and they left their home and they, relocated themselves somewhere as far away from that possibility as they could find in order to try to keep themselves safe and together. And in that relocation, they ended up forming new families, new bonds with other the same such migrants who were trying to avoid being captured. And so that was a really interesting part of the book as well. So I really think that this book has a great exploration of the realities of trying to find home, the realities of trying to connect with a culture that you're supposed to be part of, but you don't feel part of. I cannot relate in the terms of the fact that my family was not removed from my ancestral lands because of slavery. And so I do know in general which countries my ancestors came from, but I think that sense of displacement and the idea of you going back to this place that your ancestors came from and feeling that you have some bond there or some root there. But then when you get there, the people who are living there don't recognize that root. They see you as someone who's foreign, someone from another place, and someone who does not have their culture or their connections. And so it's a really, I think, interesting and important thing to think about, because a lot of countries in Africa, a lot of countries in Europe create entire tourism industries around people looking for their roots who have left and come to North America or gone to or immigrated to other countries. And so that's an interesting dilemma. It's an interesting consequence of migration. And, what is that sense of belonging really that strong, or is it something that's actually manufactured? Can you trust it? What does it mean? And how does it make you feel? So many great questions in here. Highly recommend this. And I think it was expertly done. All right. So that is Lose Your Mother by Saidiya Hartman. And I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Hey everyone. A little reading update for you today. I've decided to DNF Hawaii by James A. Michener. I got to page 57. So there's a couple reasons for this. Number one, I didn't really know this about myself till now, but I need time to psych myself up to read huge books. It's just not something I can jump into. I didn't know this about myself until now, but it is very true. So I didn't really look at the page count of this when I put it on hold at the library, and so I wasn't preparing myself for this. When I got it from the library, I thought, I could still do it. But from the beginning, I've felt very tentative about the book. The other thing that's funny is that I did my March TBR, and this, of course, counts as a Mammoth, for March of the Mammoths, which is reading books over 800 pages. This absolutely counts. So I was actually participating in a readathon and not even realizing it. Okay, so I'm also reading Hula by Jasmin, Iolani, Hakes right now. I'm listening to it on audio. And this book is doing a brilliant job of weaving together a family story and historical facts about Hawaii. And so I'm starting this, and it started at the beginning of the actual islands of Hawaii being formed over millions of years, and at 57 pages we are encountering some inhabitants of Bora Bora and Hawaii and they are making a decision to go off in search of another place. And so we're, obviously the place they're going off to search for is going to be the islands of Hawaii, where they settle this, I know this is happening. My issue is just that I don't feel like I have the attention span or frankly, I guess just the desire to take that time with this book right now. It just feels like, February was a bit rough, just in terms of health-wise. My family and I have struggled quite a bit this cold flu season with just, multiple colds and viruses that have gone through our family, which is making me feel this sense of fatigue. And so all that I'm feeling about reading this book is a sense of fatigue, and I don't think that's fair to the book. The writing is good, and the story feels a bit too centered on the male perspective for me, and I know that as a product of its time. This book was published in 1959, I think. So, it's going to have that perspective, and the female characters, copyright 1959 originally, the female characters are going to have that kind of layer of objectification that I usually can get, I can push beyond it because I know it's a product of its time, but I just don't have the patience with it right now. So while I think the characters that I did learn about in 57 pages were interesting, and I think that if I had prepared myself mentally to dive into this book and to really get into it, I would have made the commitment. I even considered doing one of my deep dive reading blogs about this book, which is what I would normally do about a book so intensive and so absorbing. I just don't have the bandwidth this month to do it. So I am going to DNF. I think it's unlikely that I will revisit this book in future, because there's so many of the books like this, like that I have on my list already. New York, Paris by Edward Rutherford, who has a very similar style. Perhaps Edward Rutherford style was born from James A. Michener's style. So super interesting as a genre of writing and as a style of creating. It's a really interesting style of book, and I do like this style of book. That's the thing. It's just that I have to be in the right mood and in the right frame of mind to let myself get really into these books, and this is just not that moment for me. So I'm gonna take this back to the library, and I'm gonna move on to something else that feels more manageable in my brain at this time in my life. So DNFing Hawaii by James A. Michener, and I will check in again with you when I have finished another book. Good morning, everybody. Aloha from Hawaii. I wanted to wrap up 3 books that I've finished in the last couple weeks, and I just haven't last week, and I haven't had time yet to wrap them up. So the first one that I finished was Fed Up by Gemma Hartley. This is a nonfiction about emotional labor, women in emotional labor, and it's, I would say, quite a bit of a memoir about her and her husband and how they worked together to try to balance the emotional labor in their home. And so emotional labor can be considered all those extra things that people do when they're trying to keep lives going. So making appointments, making times to hang out with family and friends, noticing all the little things that may or may not be getting done in the house. And it's almost always women who carry more of the emotional labor in their environments. And so this book is examining that. And I thought that she did overall a really good job of exploring it, coming up with some solutions, looking at different types of emotional labor by different types of people. But ultimately it is mostly about her and her partner and how they worked through that together. So I thought it was really informational, and I enjoyed it. The next book I finished was Hula by Jasmin, Iolani, Hakes, I think. So this one was my audiobook for the month of March, and this was a novel with some historical context thrown in there. So in her author's note at the end, she says that she put in, some real historical things, but she, does it from a fictional perspective just to give context for this Hawaiian history. And it's really a family drama following, I would say, 3 generations of women with different kind of realities as Hawaiian women, even though they're in the same family. And so it really spans a really great expanse. And I was quite involved with the characters. They each had a different, generation and then a different experience based on that. But I think it gives a really nice scope of like how Hawaii has changed, how things evolve, how things stay the same. And then it really is about the colonization of the islands and how that affects Native Hawaiians and how that has, molded Native Hawaiians in general and how they are perceived and how they are within their own culture with each other based on the influence of the United States government, based on the influence of, their own worldviews, but also trying to keep the culture, their Hawaiian culture, alive. So I was really impressed with this one. I thought that it was very well executed. It's actually a pretty new release as well. It's from 2023, so I would recommend it if you're looking for something to read about Hawaii that includes the history, but does not focus so much on the history. So you get an idea of the scope, but you're more involved in a family drama story. And then the last book I finished just last night, The Art Forger by B.A Shapiro. This follows Claire Roth, an artist with a lot of promise, who gets caught up in 2 kind of weird, slightly illegal forgery situations. I felt like the representation of the art world here was a bit sensationalistic, and I think that was for the benefit of someone who's wanting to think how exciting the art world is, when maybe it's not quite as as elaborate and exciting as this, in terms of an average painter having a visit from the curator at the MoMA for their new solo show. I mean, I think that does happen to some artists, but it's a very small percentage of artists. And so this book felt a little bit like it was stretching for me, stretching disbelief a little bit. It's called a literary thriller in the blurb on the front, and I didn't find it that thrilling. I don't know. I really want to get into thrillers in some way. I want to have that kind of pacey and propulsion to get through the book. Like, so wonder what's going to happen. But whenever I read these, I start to feel like they just don't deliver on what I'm looking for, and that they just don't have a kind of a groundedness and realism. To me, you either have to be really grounded in reality or you have to be like way out there. And this book kind of sits in the middle. And I just don't think the middle is a good place for these types of books. So while I enjoyed it, I think that, reading about an artist and, obviously she's an emerging artist, but also she's just super talented. Like there's just some cliches, I think, in this book that I found to be kind of boring, maybe, just not as inspirational or as interesting as I was hoping it would be. So this isn't a new one that I'm going to be putting on my recommended art books list. It's just
it is what it is. I think I'm actually going to leave this here at the vacation rental because they have a huge pile of books over there. So I think I'm going to leave this one here and not keep it for my collection because I just don't think it's a book that I will revisit or that I would pass on to anyone else. So those are the 3 books that I finished in the last week, and I will check in again with you when I finish another one.
Hey everyone. So last night I finished Through the Flower, My Struggle as a Woman Artist by Judy Chicago. And this is part of my reread list for 2024. I first read this book, I'm going to say it was 1998, maybe. And I read it as I was trying to come to terms with who I was and my identity as an artist, essentially, in art school. And so my memory of it was very specific to a feeling of solidarity, to a feeling of recognition, to hearing someone's struggle and feeling validated for the first time that, that this uncomfortable feeling I've had is somehow being recognized. So when rereading it, I have to say that I think most of the content of this book I didn't remember, and I think that reading it again has opened my eyes to other aspects of Judy Chicago's life as an artist that I'm trying to see in myself. So again, it was a self-reflective read. I think the part that was the most opening for me, the part that gave me the most pause for thought, was a part relating to women's work ethic, which I think is interesting because I think inevitably a feminist text that was written in the 1970s, or I think this was published in 74. So it was first published in 75. So the language, the context, so much about what Judy Chicago covers in this book has evolved and changed in conversation over the last 40 years. Almost 50 years. And so I took things from it in a really different way. And so I think that this is an important memoir in the sense that it chronicles the beginnings of Judy Chicago's journey, becoming a very pivotal feminist artist, and really working towards building community for women and giving women permission to become the fully realized and well-rounded people that we deserve and want to be, which is not just appendages of the men in our lives, but actual round, involved people who fully realize their potential. And so I think for myself, as I'm, exploring these things for myself at, in my mid to late 40s, what I'm looking for in myself is fully realizing my potential. I'm trying to fully realize my potential right now, as we speak, in this very moment. And sometimes I think I fall into a sense of complacency around how much time I have to do that. It's not comfortable to do that right now. I don't feel comfortable, so I'm going to wait till I feel comfortable. I think I make a lot of excuses for myself. And I think a lot of that is also tied into a capitalist mindset around productivity and a whole bunch of other things. And so it's hard sometimes to know when you are playing into a culture in which productivity is seen as the only state of being that is valid and that is recognized, and when you are being complacent based on your own sets of excuses or your own kind of fallback procrastination states of being, and like trying to recognize where the line is between those things or where the spectrum is around those things. So that was something that this book helped me to kind of clarify a bit for myself. And so I'm grateful for that. I think that the book is super important in terms of the history of the feminist movement in the Western world. That the things that Chicago did to try to open up the art world to women are invaluable. But in terms of a book that I think is inspiring, I think that I've changed around that now. I think that the style of the narrative felt dated to me. And I have her second memoir, which I think is called After the Flower. And so I'm curious now to read that in the next year and see, how she evolved more as a person and in her artwork and in her career and in her community work, and how that's reflected back in this, like how it reflects back onto this memoir. So yeah, so a really great exercise in rereading this. I'm really glad I did. And I think I'm going to have one more finish for you for March. So I will check in when I have finished my last book of the month. Good morning, everybody. So Essential Labor, Mothering as Social Change by Angela Garbes is my final read for March. This is a really unique nonfiction book. And judging by the reviews on Goodreads, I think it was a bit polarizing for people. I think people were expecting something as a bit more of a how-to book, but this is not a how-to book. This is I think one of the reviews calls it a manifesto, and I would say that it is a very thoughtful and deep probing of what mothering is as a verb. So this idea that mothering can be done by anyone towards people, towards the earth, towards animals, that it is an action, and that it can improve our world and bring our world into a place of better balance, sustainability. We can become better people. We can become better parents, partners, employees, community members, if we approach our outlook on the world through a mothering perspective. So I would say that is what this is about. It's very personal to Angela Garbes and her perspective. She wrote it during, or just, I would say during the later part of the pandemic. So she reflects a lot on the pandemic. I'm a little bit, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm far enough removed from the pandemic to read a lot about it right now. And there wasn't a lot in here. I'm just reflecting on, I think there was maybe one or two other memoirs or nonfictions I've read recently that talk about it. And I still feel not quite ready to delve into the pandemic as a topic too far. But there were some really great ideas in here in relation to how we can look at mothering and change it for ourselves. So these section titles are very apt for sharing that. So you have mothering as survival, mothering as valuable labor, mothering as human interdependence, mothering as encouraging appetites, mothering insists on worthiness. So all these ideas of like how we perceive mothering, how the culture of care, and this is not just about mothering a mother with a child. This is about the idea of mothering as an action that people do for care for people. The other thing that's really great about this is that Angela Garbes is a Filipino woman who immigrated with her family to the United States. And so she very much weaves in the immigrant family experience into the narrative. And so you see the struggles she had growing up, feeling kind of pulled between two cultures, but also the richness of Filipino culture for her and how she's come to terms with it as an adult in a different way than her parents did, obviously, because they're from a different generation. And she is raising her two children and is married to a white man. And so all of the things that come along with that, she is also reflecting on those things. So I think that this is a really valuable, it's not a long read. It's just over 200 pages. Yeah, 208 pages. It's got a really great amount of research in here. She's pulling from a lot of different perspectives. She's also talking about, she talks about sexuality. She talks about disabled experiences. You know, it's got, there's a lot in here for a little book. And again, it's not a how-to. It's not for like people to learn how to create social change as mothers. More so, it's about, you know, asking you to reflect on how this action can be a better gauge of be a better way to approach moving through society and the world. So it's a really lovely book. I'm really glad that I read it. So that was my reading for March. Lots of nonfiction this month. But overall, I'm pretty happy with getting these books read. These were books that have been on my TBR for a while. They're topical to things that I'm working on right now, so I'm glad that I read them right now. And I want to thank you so much for watching and getting to the end of this video. Please, if you get to the end, will you leave me an emoji? I've never done this before, but you know, we'll see. How about you leave me one of the heart emojis, whatever color you want. And I will be back again soon with another video. Thank you so much for watching.